Hey friends, it's Ryan with Arrows of Love. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about my favorite topic, love. And the reason for that is a lot of the things that are happening in the sky. I've been out and about talking with friends, and I'm hearing a consistent story over and over again. My relationship's falling apart. Things aren't going so well. Things are really confusing. I'm not really sure what to do. The terms of my relationship are changing. And I can see and I can feel the angst and the worry and that feeling of what comes next. And I want to talk through about what this energy is all about, because it is a really major shift. And it probably started maybe around Labor Day, or maybe even around the end of July or early August, when Mars conjoined Rahu, the north node of the moon, and Uranus. That was an electric moment. I was not I didn't escape it either. So my relationship fell apart basically right around that time. So, and I'm always very open and honest about what happens, because I think this is how people heal. This is how people get through some really nasty things. And right now is no exception to that. And we're heading into eclipse season, and this is the reason why I'm talking about it. All these events are kind of bubbling up right now. So let's just begin and talk about what's happening. So when we talk about love, we always talk about Venus. Venus is the planet of love, relationships, friendship, desire, sex. Venus also rules the male genitalia, for those of you that don't know. So it rules women, but Venus actually rules, the goods. While Mars actually rules, the yoni. So people, if you follow Vedic astrology, most people would know that, but if you follow Western, that might be a new concept. So I'm going to tell you why all of this matters. So right now, Venus is in her fall. She's in Virgo, and Virgo is not a happy sign for Venus to begin with, because Virgo is the sixth house. There's a zodiacal wheel, and the sixth house is a house of conflict. It's a house of health. It's a house of service. It's a house of divorce. This is where divorces happen, unfortunately. And it's not a great place for Venus overall. And the sun is sitting in Virgo as well. The sun is getting ready to move into Libra, where the sun doesn't like to be either, by the way. And Mercury is also retrograding through the sign of Libra, the sign of partnerships. So it's a review of partnerships. Where do we go? Are you dealing with a trickster? Are people on the up and up? It's all those questions are coming up right now. So let's talk about what's happening with Venus. I'm doing this video on September 19th. So Venus right now is at 17, almost 18 degrees of Virgo, while the sun is at about 26. So when you look at the sky, you're not going to be able to see Venus in the sky, because the sun is essentially burning up Venus with its rays. And Venus only goes about 45 degrees away from the sun at any point in time. That's as far as she goes. So when she gets into about 10 degrees or less, the powers of Venus are gone. The rays of the sun are outshining anything that Venus has to offer at this point. And the sun and Venus are not friends in astrology. They are archetypal opposites. The sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, the sign of the individual, doing things on your own, courage, action. It's very much an individualization. That's what the sun is. The sun doesn't need anyone. The sun just gives off energy, but doesn't need anything back. So we have solar-like figures all the time in our lives, where they just give off a ton of energy at all points in time. But when it comes to relationships, they're kind of like, don't need it. So sun and Venus are sitting in the same sign, and now Venus is creeping up to the sun. She gains speed, and she's going to be reborn in just a few weeks. And that's when we start seeing a turn in relationships, as we can start to see Venus, but not until December 3rd. That's a long time, while Venusian things really start taking a hit. And she's going to get burnt up in her own sign of Libra on top of it. And the sun in the sign of Libra is at its fall. So the sun is exalted in the sign of Aries. The exact opposite sign is the sign of fall, because here Venus wants to bring together. Venus wants to fuse. It's about beauty, negotiation, finding compromise. The sun wants none of it. The sun wants to do what it wants to do. It does not want to compromise. So in the sign of Libra, Sign of the scales, where you need balance and harmony and negotiating, the sun wants none of it. So this is where Venus gets burnt up. So all Venusian things. We could be dealing with issues with intimacy. We could be dealing with issues with friends. There could be what's mine and what's yours. All of these things are coming up, and negotiations don't really go so well because Venus is gone. Can't see her in the sky. On top of it, Mercury, the planet of communication, business, is also traveling back toward the sun in his retrograde motion in the sign of Libra, which is the sign of partnerships. So you have these three planets coming very, very close to the sun, and the sun is just burning it up. It's going to release and remake these planets in the next few weeks, but we have to go through some kind of nasty stuff overall. So Venus is going to close up to the sun. She's going to conjoin the sun. I will tell you when, because this is when Venus is combust essentially, and once Venus gets to the heart of the sun, this is when we can start really, it's a moment of clarity in our relationships essentially, and this is when Venus is essentially reborn. Venusian-like things start to come back. Maybe you have a brilliant idea of how to fix your relationship. Maybe there's there's a breakthrough of some type. It's also really great for creativity. And remember, Venus is creativity. It is about creating something. Sex and romance is about procreation too. So don't think that this isn't all part of the grand master plan. So if things aren't going well in relationships right now, taking up art, being creative with writing, anything like that is a really healthy way of releasing this energy. So the sun and Venus are going to conjoin. It's actually the sign of Scorpio at about 1 degree right around October 24th, which is also the time that Mars is going to station retrograde. Oh man, I mean, this is going to be a really difficult one. So the sun and Venus come together, first degrees of Scorpio. This is where Venus is in her fall. So essentially she's debilitated in the sign of Virgo because it's a Mercury ruled house. Mercury's thinking. Mercury's about the rational mind. It's about getting down to business, really getting down to the core of things, right? It's about decoding, dissecting, healing, really kind of coming up with brilliant ideas in a way. It's more about that cerebral feeling, whereas Venus is more about the feels. She just wants to be cuddled. She wants to be held, and she wants to be told she's pretty, like all of us do, right? So she goes through kind of this nasty portion in Virgo, and then she gets burnt up by the sun while she's traveling through her own sign of Libra, pretty much all through October and the rest of September, and then she enters into Scorpio where she's in her fall. And let me explain this a little bit. So she rules Taurus. On the exact opposite side of the wheel is Scorpio. Scorpio is a Mars-ruled house. It's about secrets, it's about sex, it's about death and rebirth. It's about regeneration and healing. It's getting down to some really nasty things about power struggles in your relationships, possessiveness, obsession is a really big one on top of it. So Venus is essentially burnt up at its core at 1 degree of Scorpio, and then she starts moving forward toward the south node of the moon, which is K2. And K2 is always about release. It's about liberation. In Vedic astrology, it's known as moksha. And in the sign of Scorpio, it's very much about letting go of old karmic wounds. This is about clearing out old karma and burning up karma of the past. And Scorpio is an intense sign as it is. If anybody's got Scorpio in their chart, you know it. You feel it on a kind of a different level. And then Mars goes retrograde. So it's like, it's almost like we can't catch a break, right? It's like Venusian-like things. We want to come together, but we're not seeing eye to eye on things. Perhaps we're not seeing the value of a relationship. Venus gets burnt up by the sun with this Mercury retrograde. It goes into debilitation then in Scorpio. And then all of a sudden we start having eclipse season right around this time as Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, starts going retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And the sign of Gemini is a sign of the mind. It's a sign of learning. So Venus and the sun are trying to teach us something about our relationships, and it has to do with action and the mind. Are we being obsessive about something that we're just not supposed to have? Because that south node, when Venus meets up with that south node, it's going to be, well, let's find out. She's going to be the first one there. Let's see, when does she finally get to K2? Yeah, right around November 2nd, Venus meets up with K2, and K2 is about release. K2 is about letting things go from the past. You're burning off past life karma. So it's difficult. You have to release something here that could be really difficult in love. So Venus is the first one right after she gets burnt up by the sun. Then the sun meets up with K2, and then Mercury meets up with K2. It's like one after the next. And then it's eclipse season. So it's like massive, massive changes all at once. And then you got this Mars retrograde and the sign of Gemini, which is very much about the mind. People are going to really feel this one, like almost like obsessive compulsive behavior, losing it a little bit, right? That is really what this is about. And it's how do we control our emotions and the mind while we have all of these retrograde planets happening the rest of the year. We're coming into eclipse season on the Taurus Scorpio axis, which has a lot to do with finance. It has a lot to do with the senses, has a lot to do with speech, family matters, what's mine and what's yours. And a lot of it has to do with secrets too, because you got that Scorpio energy coming up, and that's a bubbling of things from the underworld that we didn't see over the last few months, because all these retrograde planets, and we had Neptune involved with Mercury retrograde, where it could have been really confusing because Neptune clouds things. Neptune is haze, scandals, romance too, right? So it could be like, oh, you meet someone, or you've been dating someone for a long time, and all of a sudden something comes up and you're like, where did this come from? Why didn't you tell me this? That's that Neptune haze coming out. So all of this energy, all of these personal planets are going to be hitting K2 in the sign of Scorpio, which is, it's going to be a rough one for all of us on some level here. And then the eclipses start coming in right around Halloween and early November. And those are always massive changes. So you have to take a look and see, where does this hit in your chart? And what houses are being activated by the chart. Now, I'm going to step back for a second here, because Venus is about women. Venus is about relationships, desire, intimacy, friendships. But Venus also rules the male parts. So, there could be issues with potency, to be quite honest, where maybe people are just having issues with what's going on down under there. So men in particular might be having some trouble because Venus rules semen. So be sure you're watching your sexual health. Be sure you're on the up and up with things, because all of this Scorpio energy coming about is going to release secrets. It's going to be potentially very difficult to get through, but it's also incredibly healing. So again, I don't want to scare people here and thinking, oh my God, my relationship is doomed. It's just the Venusian-like things aren't seen for quite some time. So it's going to be hard to negotiate the terms of your relationship. It's going to be hard to see how to get through some intimacy issues potentially. It's a release. So if something is not working, it's got to be reworked. It's got to be released in some way, because K2 is going to take it out if it's not meant for you. And it can be very, very difficult in the sign of Scorpio, because Scorpio is just so intense as it is. And Mars retrograde, it just adds to that intensity. Sometimes it's also inaction, because Mars is action. It's inertia. So maybe you just don't want to take action at all. And people are feeling stuck. They don't know what to do. They're lost in their head and in their thoughts, and they're not making any moves. And that can be equally as frustrating when you're trying to move something forward, but you can't. So this is the reason why these next few months are going to feel very strange. But the good news is some of the outer planets Saturn and Jupiter are going to start moving forward again. So that's forward movement, which is always a good thing. So even though the personal planets are doing some crazy things over the next couple of months, especially with the eclipses, Venus and Mercury being burnt up by the sun and then being reborn in the next few months, all of that is going to culminate into something much larger. So you're in a new direction, essentially. Oh my gosh, here we go, right? I mean, if you don't feel it, if you're not experiencing it yet, it doesn't matter if you're married, you're single, seeing someone, interested, not seeing someone, it's gonna affect us no matter what. So I'm gonna walk through the different signs. This is for rising sign or your sun sign, depending, if you want to do sun sign, that's fine too. But you got to know your rising sign. So I'm going to walk through each one, and I'm going to discuss the eclipses, because this is really where this is where the action occurs. This is where things start to really change, and that access, and what does it mean for us. So I'm actually going to start with, let's start with Aries, because you're impatient and you guys always have things to do. So Aries, you're going to be very much involved in this one because Mars rules Scorpio and Aries, that's you, and it's going to be on the 2nd and 8th house axis. So Taurus and Scorpio Taurus is 2 signs past Aries, and then Scorpio is 8 signs past Aries. This is going to be an intense one. It could have to do with money. Could have to deal with the senses, your speech. You got to really watch your speech on this one. You're going to feel really impulsive, like you're just going to want to cut someone because that's what you want to do anyway. You're always on the warpath, Aries. But here you're going to have to really watch your speech. And these eclipses on the 2nd and 8th, maybe you're dealing with loans, you're dealing with debts. It's the essential question is, what is mine and what is yours? It's a very intense house. It's also, the 8th house is a house of endings, upheaval, but it's also a regeneration and rebirth. So always remember that, you go through some really tough things in that 8th house, and then once you get through it, there's a rebirth of some type. So always remember that. So if it feels really intense for you, and it's going to, especially with Mars in that 3rd house. In Gemini, the 3rd house has to do with competitors, marketing and selling, your local environment, traveling. All of that is going to take a hit. It's going to feel really frustrating for you, Aries. So you got to really take your time, and you got to really watch your speech, because Rahu and Ketu are going to they're going to tell you, no, you need to stop. Something needs to give here, Aries, if you're trying to push something forward that is not meant to be. So you got to really watch that over the next couple of months here, at least through November. So 2 and 8, money, what's mine and what's yours. Watch what you're putting in your body. I mean, it's because the 2nd house has to do with nourishment, speech, family, food. Maybe something needs to be cut out in your diet. That's definitely something that could come up for you. Taurus rising. The eclipses are happening in your 1st and your 7th house. This has to do with you and others. So this could impact friendships. This could impact your partnerships, your business partnerships. It's the people that are close to you. The 7th house is the other. It's also legal contracts. So maybe you're looking to sign a contract and things kind of just go sideways on you because K2 in that 7th house is saying you got to release something here. There's something about how you relate to other people, how you go about forming relationships that has to stop because it's not working. And K2 is going to take it out if you don't stop. And the other thing is Rahu is in your 1st house, which means you're being attracted to karmic relationships. If things feel like you're reliving past relationships in a certain way, shape, or form, it is the universe trying to teach you a lesson. That something has to give, something has to be released. And with Rahu in your 1st house, you have to be really careful with creating an illusion. No, and what I mean by that is Rahu is the illusion. Rahu is desire. It wants to give you all of your desires. It wants to lure you in with the hot guy or the hot girl. It wants to give you the money because desire is what takes you away from spirit. You have to learn how to control your desires. You have to learn how to control the need for the illusion. You have to be your authentic self. And that's what this is teaching you. It's taking out all of the parts of your identity that are not meant for you, so you can attract the partner that is meant for you. But it's going to take out people in your life that are not meant for you anymore. It's moksha and liberation. That's what K2 is in that 7th. And it's about upheaval. It's about secrets. It's about things not seen. But the way through it is to not create the illusion and be your authentic self. Mars in the 2nd house in Gemini, it's cutting out speech. It has a lot to do with your communication and the way you think about things. So if relationships aren't going well, think about how it is you are talking to other people. Are you giving false illusions to other people? And I'm not saying that's like for everyone, right? Like Taurus, you tend to be on the up and up for the most part, but you get caught in the senses. You get caught in desire so easily. And it can be your downfall. I have Taurus friends, and they all say they want relationships, but they don't act like it. And you know who you are. You can't be sitting on Grindr if you want a relationship. You know who you are. That's not the way this one works. And in fact, what the universe will do is you'll find a relationship through one of these apps, perhaps, and it will fucking destroy you. You got to stop. So, sorry for the language there, but Taurus, like, you got to wake up on this one, because I know my Taurus friends, and you're completely stubborn, and you say you want one thing, but you don't act like it. So I'm going to give it to you real. I'm going to give it to you real. You need to stop with the illusions, and you know who you are. I'm not talking to like one or two people. It's kind of all of you. Something's got to give here. So it's a little bit of a wake-up call for you, Taurus. You're burning off old karma. Think about your speech. Think of it as how you're attracting people. Are you attracting the type that you really want? Are you going to places and looking for people that are really there to commit to you? Because you want commitment. You're ruled by Venus. You want that commitment, but are you acting like it? That's the real question for you. All right, I'll let up on you, Taurus. I kind of went off. But I'm going to also go off on Scorpio too, because it's going to be a wake-up call for both of you. All right, Gemini. Gemini, this one might be a little bit trickier for you because the eclipses are going to happen on the 12th and 6th axis, and those are difficult houses. So the 6th house has to do with conflict, work, health, routine. Something here with your health needs to be potentially addressed. Could even be something in the blood, because Scorpio rules blood. It could be even genetics here. So if you're having some health issues, maybe that's where you look. And that 12th house has to do with endings. It has to do with self-sabotage, escapism, confinement and isolation. So when you have Ketu when you have Rahu in that 12th, I went through this transit not too long ago, maybe like a year or two ago, and it will show you your weak spot. It will show you your blind spot, and what it is that needs to be released here, and what's the illusion that you're creating with potentially intimacy, right? It could be your sleep even, but it also has to do with perhaps learning astrology. So that's one way to get through eclipses on the 12th and the 6th. Take care of your health, take care of your routine, make sure your pets are being taken care of. That's one way to bring down that 6th house of conflict. But people are going to be, enemies that are essentially hidden and enemies that are open. I mean, and it's going to feel like a lot of conflict, but the eclipses are going to take it out. So that's actually the one good thing about this. But there's some illusion here with 12th house matters, and it has to do with escapism. So it could be sex, drugs, alcohol, those things that take you away from God, essentially. Or maybe it's one of those things that you want to escape so you can feel God, or you just don't want to be a part of this reality. And maybe that's what this eclipse season is all about. But 12 and 6, the best piece of advice is do research. Do research on whatever it is that you really want to learn, Gemini, because you're the cosmic learner, right? So it's time then to cut something out, because that's where Mars is at. It could be something within the body. Maybe you got to get back into a good health routine, and then do research on maybe astrology or the tarot or the occult sciences, because that's a really good way to harness that 12th house. Cancer rising. The eclipses are happening in the 5th and the 11th axis. So the 5th house has to do with children, fun, games, entertainment, romance, short-term romance. So this one could be difficult, Cancer. If you're single, it could potentially be an ending of a relationship, but you might actually gain a friend. So the 11th house has to deal with gains, friendships, allies, your group associations here. So perhaps someone is not appearing the way that they actually are, or someone's appearing the way they're actually not. And it could be a little bit of a heartbreak for you, because that 5th house has to deal with romance usually. But it also has to do with children. So keep an eye on your children if you're married. It could be one of those things that, it could even be, this is just for some people, I'm just getting this, someone loses, has a miscarriage, perhaps even. There's some issues with pregnancy, because K2 is losses and Venus is getting burnt up in the sign of Scorpio. So I want people to be aware of that. There could be some complications with pregnancy here, if you are pregnant. So make sure you're going to the doctor and taking care of yourself. But the 11th house also has to do with gains. And that's where Rahu is sitting. So it could be some really big gains coming from whatever it is you have to release in that house of Scorpio. So always remember that. So again, Cancer, you're like one of the few signs here that might go through some pretty rough things, but at the end of it, you get something quite big, because the 11th house is always like that hard work. And you finally get that reward, essentially. So keep your friends close. If a romantic interest doesn't appear to be what it seemed originally, I would say maybe back off and start detaching from that, because the eclipses on that cycle can be pretty heart-wrenching. Leo rising. The eclipses are happening on the 4 and 10 axis, and this one could be a little bit more challenging for you, because those are angular houses. 4 and 10, 4, 10, 7, and 1 are the more challenging ones, to be quite honest, when you have eclipses there. So it has a lot to do with home and work. So something in the house needs to be given up. It could be property. It could be relooking at the foundation of your relationships. 4th house also has to do with motherhood. So keep that in mind as well. And then that 10th house is also being activated by the eclipses. So some of you might be moving for a job. Perhaps career takes a sudden change out of nowhere and you have to move, perhaps. That's not beyond the realm of possibility here. That 10th house also has to do with your reputation. So Leo, you are the shining beacon. You're ruled by the sun. Make sure you are taking care of your reputation out in the world. That could potentially take a hit here too. So I want people to be aware of that, but it has to do with home and work and tension between the two. The two are changing in some way, shape, or form. Virgo and Virgo rising, the eclipses are happening in your 3rd and 9th house. So this has a lot to do with learning, travel, gurus and mentors, father figures, far off distance, far off lands, your beliefs and your ideals. So 3 and 10 and it also has to do with siblings, your local environment too, and travel. So what I want to say here is perhaps something needs to be let go in the local environment that you are holding on to, or perhaps you're having some issues with siblings coming up here from faraway lands, right? Dad can come up here too, because the 9th house is being activated by Taurus. So I want people to be aware there is a family type element here, but it's also to do with your beliefs and what do you believe in love, and how do you want your relationship. Perhaps something is fundamentally changing on this. You could be dating someone far off too, in different states, different country. Maybe there's a sudden move and you guys come together. That's not beyond the realm of possibility either. But that third house has a lot to do with communication too. So something within your communication might need to stop. Maybe something in your belief system needs to stop. So something better can come in here. So be aware of that. It's a good time to learn. It's a good time to publish. It's a good time to get yourself out there and talk. But realize that something within your speech or local short distance travel has to be refigured here of some type. Libra. This is also occurring in your 2nd house and your 8th house. So again, this has a lot to do with money, resources, possessions, food, and your speech. So something here is changing on this level, but it has a lot to do with money, so it could be job related as well. And then that 8th house of Taurus is also being activated, and that has a lot to do with other people's money, joint ventures, coming together with people. It's your spouse's money as well. So something here could be changing on that front. Maybe there's a loss. Again, it could be a loss of a job of some type or cash. A big expense comes in of some type that you weren't expecting, because that 2nd and 8th house it can be pretty intense, to be quite honest. And let's see here. Yeah, and your ruling planet Venus is combust during this time, so it's going to feel like you can't really negotiate. Maybe you're trying to negotiate a contract and it's just not going well. But that 2nd house, something's got to be let go. That's where K2 is sitting, and it very well could be with speech. Maybe you gotta open up on something here, and it's gonna change the way you look at your dynamics with other people. Could be some debts coming up to mortgages that come up with that 8th house. Finance usually comes up with that 8th house. So maybe you're looking to buy a house too. Who knows? There's a lot of things that come up with that 8th house. But it's a house of secrets too. So that's why I keep saying this has a lot to do with speech. So maybe you just need to come clean with something here, Libra. Scorpio, this is happening in your 1st house and your 7th house of Taurus. Again, this has to do with partnerships, one-on-one relationships, friendships, sex, intimacy. Something's changing here. And K2 is in your 1st house, which means, it's something within you has to be let go. And you could be magnetically attracted to someone else. But with Rahu there, it could be a little bit of illusion. There could be something here that you don't really see. And it's going to draw you in, because that's what Rahu does. It's desire. It's a pull that you cannot escape. So you have to go through this. But when these eclipses are happening on your axis, you and others, expect big changes with partnerships. People come in, people come out. So it's not always bad. But with this case, it's with Venus just being burnt up by the sun. I don't like this one, to be quite honest. It's a tough one, and I think we're going to see people leave, and things that aren't working for us have to be let go, essentially. Not an easy one for you, Taurus and Scorpio. Sag, you're going to hit on the 12th and 6th axis. Scorpio is your 12th house. Taurus is your 6th. This has a lot to do with your health. You got to watch your health on this one. Your routine, how you're taking care of yourself. Work could be implicated here as well. There's going to be things changing on that front. The 12th house has a lot to do with escapism and secrets, and intimacy. So things that are done at night that no one else sees. So something's got to be let go here, Sagittarius. So it's very much about escapism. Where are you self-sabotaging? Are you self-sabotaging to the point that it's affecting your health and your routine and your work? Those are all questions that are going to come up here. And this is, again, 12 and 6 aren't easy ones. It's conflict, it's things unseen, it's things bubbling up from the surface that are a little bit otherworldly. With Venus combust in that 12th house, this one could be a little bit more challenging for you. But the way through it is through your health. Take care of you, Sag. Your wealth is in your health. Take care of you. Learn astrology. Get back to the tarot. That's the easiest way to deal with 12th house eclipses is research, study, give to charity, help people out. Think about other people aside from yourself. That is the easiest way to get through eclipses on the 12th and the 6th. Capricorn, this is happening in your 5th and your 11th axis. So Taurus is your 5th house, Scorpio is your 11th. This has to do with fun and games, romance, children. It also has to do with friends, your allies, your group associations. You could be changing group friends. You could be, letting certain friends go that don't align with you anymore. Or you could be letting a significant other go that isn't aligning with you anymore. And with Rahu there, you're going to be magnetically attracted to people that are going to come into your life and change you in some way, shape, or form. It's going to rip you open, Capricorn, and then it's going to remake you. This could also have to do with children, so some of you might be getting pregnant too. And that's true for any 5th house axis, so be aware of that. But there could be some complications here as well, because Venus, again, is not doing so well in the sign of Scorpio, where she's debilitated and she's getting burnt up. It's like we don't get any Venusian-like things here, so it can be really difficult in that sense. But again, you might need to let go of some friends. Maybe you got to let go of some group associations, and those short-term romances. Maybe you got to change your idea of what romance is, because Uranus is sitting there, and Uranus is the great change maker. So something here probably needs to change. How do you relate to others? What's your conception of romance? Do you want kids? Those are all questions that might come up for you, Capricorn. Aquarius rising. Your 4th and 10th house are getting activated here, so this has a lot to do with home and work again. You could be changing jobs unexpectedly, maybe moving unexpectedly. The 4th house is a very private house, so it's things that you do at the home. So maybe you're changing things up at home. Overall, this also has to do with mom. So the 4th house has a lot to do with mom. So, keep that in mind as well. Maybe some of you become mothers. Others of you might need to take care of mom during a certain point of time while Venus is getting burnt up by the sun, because Venusian-like things again are being dissipated by the sun. And maybe there's all of a sudden a change at work to a loss, perhaps. Maybe leaders get shipped, a female leader loses her job or something to that effect, and maybe you all of a sudden get a promotion. So, eclipses work in mysterious ways. I don't want to say it's one thing. I want to give you the archetype of what's being activated. So it's work in its home. So maybe some of you have to move for a job. Maybe some of you leave a job and you end up moving and you're like, this isn't working for me anymore. That would not be surprising. So keep those themes in mind. But it has a lot to do with foundation. And how solid is that foundation right now? Pisces and Pisces rising, your 3rd and your 9th house are getting activated. The 3rd house has to do with travel, your local environment, siblings, marketing and selling, competitors. Remember that. Perhaps competitors are suddenly washed out of the marketplace. But it also has to do with speech and communication. So something here needs to be released, essentially. What are your beliefs here? Are they changing? So that 9th house has to do with your higher education. It also has to do with the higher mind, your religion, people that you associate with. So it's also long distance travel as well. So some of you might be wanting to take a trip, or maybe you need to let go of too much travel. Maybe that's part of it too, and you need to focus more on your local environment. That's not beyond the realm of possibility here, but you're going to be attracted to that 3rd house. There's something in that communication sector that really needs to be analyzed. Something needs to be changed. Perhaps you need to talk about your feelings a little bit more. Maybe they need to come out. And you, Pisces, you're really good with that. You're built on emotion, but maybe there's some emotion that needs to be released and there's some healing that needs to be done. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this, very general archetypes, but I want to start getting this word out here because I'm hearing from friends, like things aren't going so well in relationships. I don't know what to do. People want to change the terms of their relationships suddenly, and this is the explanation for it. We are on a path on the ecliptic where massive changes are coming. So there's nothing we can do about it. Eclipses are destined, they're karmic. The universe works in mysterious ways, and Taurus and Scorpio has a lot to do with money and finance, has a lot to do with secrets, what's mine and what's yours, sex and romance, all of it, and it's extremely intense. So the best thing we can do in this situation is to be honest about our feelings. Scorpio is a sign of transformation. It's about letting things bubble up that have been buried probably for a while, so you can release it and you can heal it. But once you go through these eclipses, we got a few more to go. The nodes of the moon are going to be on the Taurus Scorpio axis until 2023. So we got another round or two to go. It's not over yet. This is just the beginning, but this is the first one. And this one's going to be intense just because the Venusian-like qualities are dissipating until December 3rd, essentially. Then we have some planets starting to move forward again. Once Mars is done with its retrograde phase in the sign of Gemini, and it's going to make people roll nuts. People are going to go people are going to be losing their minds. And we're going to have, meditation is probably one of the best things we can do in this one, because I think it's going to be a lot of swirling up here. Round and around and around, and Scorpio is already obsessive. So obsessive energy, you gotta release it in a healthy way. And that's really the key. Are we releasing our energy in a healthy way, or are we running people over in the meantime? Those are all questions we're going to have to answer as we get closer to the eclipses. And it's right around Halloween. It starts around Halloween, and then 2 weeks after that, right around, I think it's November 3rd. Is it the 3rd? I'll tell you. What day is that? Oh, November 8th, okay. So November 8th is when we have the lunar eclipse in Taurus, and then 2 weeks before that, which would be October 25th, right around Halloween. It's in Scorpio, and that's when the veil between this world and the ethereal is at its thinnest. Very spiritual, very karmic. We are burning off old karma. Remember that. So we can be reborn. We can be liberated from our old karma of past lives. It's going to be an intense one. I'll be back with the tarot probably this week. I wanted to get this message out because I think people are wondering, what the hell is happening? It's weird, right? It's weird. So let's remember that, and let the universe do its thing. Don't push, don't force it, can't force it. Until next time, give this a thumbs up, leave a comment, it helps the algorithm. I appreciate it too. I do respond to comments, by the way. I read all of them. So I'm here. If you've got any questions, let me know. Take care, guys.